Hello, and welcome to episode 75 of the Great Canadian Hockey Podcast. I'm James Parisi here with my co host Aiden Sarah, and we've got a ton of hockey to get into, as we did last week. A little less hectic, but it feels a little more fun. And you know what? I'm feeling pretty good this week, Aiden. I don't know about you, but the sun's been out. It's kind of those cold winter days where it's that clear blue sky, and when the sun sets, you get that little, like, I don't know, hazily tint in the air. It's just been kind of positive. I mean, I want more of it. And I am not the type of person to ever want more of anything in winter, other than more sun and more heat. So, I mean, excitement's good, positivity's good. How are things on your end, fella?
Other end of the coin weather-wise in terms of the your trend away from winter weather. It's been snowy and cold and then more snowy after that. Um, I'm making a trip north though on Thursday uh
Trip north?
to watch Vancouver in Edmonton. So
Ooh.
that's what I got on my mind for this week is just how that game's gonna go. And we're gonna get to why it's such an interesting prospect in a little bit here in the conversation. But that's you asked me how my week's going. It's anticipation. That's all it's been for me. Is just eagerly waiting.
God, there's so much to talk about in regards to like what is going on with Vancouver and what's going on with Edmonton. That's like we could totally destroy our entire rundown here and make a mess of everything and lose all sense of order if we just hop into these little things, but we'll get there. We'll get there. Aiden, anything else going on in life? Anything new? I feel like we haven't really updated our listeners on what we're all about, what we've been doing in the last little while.
Not a superb amount. Still doing a ton of work for my broadcast company, and they shout out to Dave Dawson and everybody at HN Live for making it so much fun. But they we had a tournament up in St. Albert this weekend, and Dave called me a couple weeks ago. He's the person in charge of the company and asked me if I can help out with the editing for this weekend. And I had said yes, and then he shoots me the email right before the tournament, and he goes, "Hey, I don't. I think the verbiage was, I don't think you realize what you're taking on your shoulders here." Um, so all I've done, like it's now Tuesday. This is the first day that I haven't been sitting in front of my computer just editing hockey video since last Thursday, and it was quite nice not to be doing that today. So it's yeah, it's funny when people when I go home and people ask me like, so what do you do all day? Do you just do you just sit around and watch hockey? It's like, yeah, for better or for worse, that that is what work is right now. It's a lot of just either sitting at home or being in an arena watching hockey.
God, my work life is so far and different. I'm just like outside sweating and lifting stuff. You know, I actually curled a jackhammer the other day. I picked a jackhammer up out of a hole and I curled it upward. And then I realized after that that is ridiculous. That's not something I should be able to do. I'm not that strong, but it's just like you get this little work strength going where you need to get something done and you just want to get to the end of the day. But I mean, for me, I don't really think that much is new. I mean, I'm in a relationship now. I'm officially girlfriend James. That's different.
This is the first time I've had girlfriend James in my life, personally.
Yeah, it's definitely different. I mean, I I don't know. I might not be as much of a creature of the night as I used to be, but yeah, I'm just like having good sleeps and eating incredible food. You know, actually 2 days ago, I cooked up some Ecuadorian shrimp in a uh basil lemon garlic sauce that I homemade with a lemon pepper chicken breast on top of some garlic mashed potatoes. And dude, I didn't know I was this good of a cook. I was getting crazy praise from the girlfriend about this, and I was looking at it and going, "Wait, I'm kind of awesome at this. I'm actually
What
really, really good at cooking."
do you know what the element is that makes it specifically Ecuadorian?
I have no idea. It
No.
was just like a little more expensive than another one, and like I helped my mom with some grocery shopping at some point, and then she threw it in her freezer, and then she went. Last time I went and visited her when I took my little brother to see Sonic the Hedgehog, um, she was like, "Never gonna cook this. I don't know what to do with this," and immediately I was like, "Bam, lemon garlic sauce. Put it over top of all the other things." It's going to be awesome. And it was awesome. It was top notch. I've eaten a lot of high-end restaurant food. I like fine dining. And this was up to par. I'm good at something else. I discovered a new talent, Aiden. So yeah, cooking, eating good food, hanging out with a girlfriend. Things have been pretty chill, pretty awesome. Tweaked my ankle again at work. That's kind of annoying. If you have an ankle injury, it just it just kind of happens. Like you're just gonna twist or roll ankles at some point in your life. It's really annoying. But Aiden, are you ready to get to some hockey? I'm ready to get to some hockey.
Well, I have a quick suggestion because if I punt this, I'm gonna totally forget about it when
Mhm.
it's a little bit more pertinent of a time to bring it up. Rather than bringing a movie or a game, I think with this new revelation, I should open the door and say at the end of every podcast, you bring like a meal you cooked that you are like
Okay.
you crushed that week. If this is gonna be a consistent thing where you're not only cooking but you're like branching out and trying new things. Like we'll in lieu of one of the things at the end, we'll have like a James's meal of the week, and even if like even if you totally like screwed the pooch on it, like just to have something you took a swing on in there.
I actually did like totally screw up some soup earlier. Like 100%. Like the pot needs some love. The food came out just ruined. Like I wasted a bunch of groceries. I completely destroyed it. So it's not all hits. There are some misses. But yes, I do love that idea. That's a ton of fun. I mean, and I take pictures of it too the odd time so I can send it to my mom or my uncle or my grandma. Like I get right into it. This is like this Chef James thing is a whole side persona that I've fully developed lately. But it's hockey time, and there's something I got a little uppity about last podcast, and that something was Malkin's Stanley Cup rings being stolen. So, as far as we can tell, it turns out they weren't ever stolen. In fact, I'm starting to wonder if Evgeny Malkin even knew where his cup rings were to begin with. Because 5 days ago, an article came out, and apparently local police had announced that this was Thursday, that Evgeny Malkin's three Stanley Cup rings were found in his home after the burglary. They were never gone. The burglars didn't break back in and put the rings back. That's not what happened. There's no way that's what happened. Malkin put out a statement thanking police, blah, 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 blah. Police say that the investigation remains ongoing, which is a statement and bundle of words that I really don't miss writing as a former news reporter that reported on a lot of local crime. The investigation remains ongoing. God, that is so dull. Nobody wants to hear or read that. I can't believe I wrote those words. I empathize with anyone who has to write those all the time because you do have to say that. But what the hell? Did Malkin just be like, I don't know where rings are. Where are rings? And then the police are like, your home was broken into. These cup rings are stolen. They're valuable. What the hell happened here, Aiden? Do you have an idea of any kind? I firmly believe Malkin never knew where the rings were.
Yeah, well, the he still had his house burglarized, right?
Oh, yes,
Obviously.
yes.
So,
Someone did break
yeah,
into his house.
I think you're absolutely right. Where he had no idea where they were, and I'm sure we've all done this. Everybody who, isn't completely put together with their belongings, which is everybody. Like you think you know where something is, and you can be so 100% sure that this thing you're looking for was in this place, and then sure enough, days later you'll find it somewhere completely different. Like I wonder if Malkin just, he looked in the spot he thought they were. That wasn't where he or somebody else had left them, and oh, it's gone after a burglary. 1 + 1 = 2, right? It makes it. There's some logic that could have gone into this, but you're right that I think it was just kind of a silly mistake. If that's where you're, if that's what you're saying by he just didn't know where they were.
Also, I do have to add, just before we get too far past this, that voice I did imitating Gino, that's not a Russian accent, and that's not an attempt at a good Malkin impression. But a group of my friends and I have been big fans of the guy for a very long time, and a lot of the time we would be playing chell or we'd be watching hockey, and he would do something kind of silly, something kind of weird. And we would just use that voice and be like, "Oh, I don't know what his stick is. I just swore." Like it's just something we would do all the time. It's not a disrespectful thing. It's not a Russian accent. It's none of those things. But regardless, it will always be funny to me, and I will probably use that voice sometime on this podcast again. It's going to happen. But time to move on to something that's kind of dominating the hockey world right now in news and discussion and all of those things. Connor McDavid and Tyler Myers both received 3 game suspensions for cross checks. A lot of people are bringing up that McDavid has been treated harshly by refs over the years. He's drawn some of the least amount of penalties per 60 minutes out of guys in the league. It's like 160th most penalty minutes drawn in the NHL or something like that. I don't know. I was just reading something and listening to something. I could be totally off with the numbers, but regardless, a lot of people think he doesn't really get the treatment he would sometimes deserve. He does take a beating very often, as Aiden would definitely know from all the Oilers hockey he watches. And some people feel that the suspension for 3 games was a little bit heavy when it comes to the biggest star in the league. Aiden, how do you feel? What are your thoughts on this? And I mean, if applicable, where do we go from here?
Yeah, I think Leon Draisaitl today, what he said was pretty much that summarized how I feel, which was just somebody asked him about it in a media scrum, and all he said was, "Yeah, I think each guy got a game too much." And yeah, when people ask me, I said 1 or 2 games for each guy for a cross check in the teeth. Um, I think James in hockey we have a few problems, and then there are a bunch of symptoms of these problems. And I think all this boils down to is yet again the referees are on the ice not calling what's happening. They're calling a game for the sake of managing it in a specific way, right? And I think the abuse Connor McDavid takes isn't penalized because he takes so much realistically. And I know this is a sentiment that I know many are going to be a little bit tired of hearing from Oilers fans that have caused enough of an uproar that the team's even needing to come out and say something. Like he does get treatment that realistically should be called significantly more than it is. But the reason it's not, I don't think is a nefarious thing against the Oilers. I don't think it's a nefarious thing against McDavid. I think it's just the referees are so unwilling to call a game in a manner that would slant the amount of power plays very heavily in favor of one team. And so I think the insistence of the officials to police the game in such a way that rather than every penalty being called, the calls and the flow of the game is maintained in as even a way as possible. I think this kind of thing is going to keep happening. And I'm not sure if you saw James what Connor Garland said. Connor Garland said pretty much the same thing. Like that was my best chance to win in that moment. Like I understand what I was doing, and I get that emotions boiled over a little bit for him, right? Um, I don't think either guy should have got away with it completely because you can't just do that. But 3 games was too many for both. I also don't think this needs to be as big of a thing as we've now arrived at it being, right? Like
That's the point I was
yeah,
waiting for.
yeah.
That's
I don't
what
know
I was
if
waiting for.
I don't know if you, yeah, I thought my tone and inflection was conveying that I just kind of am a little bit sick of this,
You know
even
what's
just
really,
being.
really telling, Aiden, about exactly the point you just made? As soon as you said the word nefarious twice, something clicked in my head, and I stopped listening to almost every word you said, and I Googled Dr. Nefario, which is a character from the Despicable Me movies, and I just went into a quick deep dive about who that is because you know what? I've spent my last couple days of hockey content absorption just seeing so much and way too much about the fact that a player was suspended for probably a game more than they needed to be.
Well, and like I said, like the Oilers team put out a statement, man. Like, what are we doing, guys? Like, it's a 3 game suspension. What? Like, come on. I just, yeah, you're right. And I think at the end of the day, what it is the NHL actually not wanting McDavid and Myers to play on Thursday against each other, or be in that game like specifically. Genuinely, I think that's it. Is just they don't want it turning into a bloodbath or anything like that. So
You know what? More bloodbaths. I like them.
yeah, I think there's an entertainment factor that they're not taking into account for better or for worse.
Yeah, yeah, like that would be like if they suspended Kachuk or Doughty for any of the things they did to each other in those crazy Flames versus Kings games back in like 2021 when everything was very, very fun between those two teams. Those guys were trying to kill each other every shift. There were multiple suspendable things they were doing to each other every game.
Kachuk and Zach Cassian too comes to mind in that vein.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, leave the guys in. Let them do something stupid. Give me something to make me want to turn the game on as opposed to another game. You know? Speaking of the Oilers, because it's time to move on from this mind-numbing topic. I'm sure there are other people as bored of hearing about it as we are. John Klingberg signs with the Edmonton Oilers. 1 year, $1 million, as Aiden said. Aiden was very adamant about the fact that Klingberg could be signing with the Oilers, and here we go, buddy. You got one. Insider? Maybe.
I don't know. I don't know about Insider, but this is a guy I think you and I both really, really liked in his prime, right? Like John
Yes.
Klingberg was a superb defenseman.
We
Um,
gushed about him last pod.
yeah. So he was on the Oilers broadcast right before they just played a game against the Washington Capitals. James and I are recording Tuesday the 21st, evening of. They just lost 3-2 to Washington. Klingberg didn't play, but he talked to Gene Principe about the procedure he got. So he got the joints in both hips replaced. Like
Hmm.
that's the surgery that we're talking about here for Klingberg. Patrick Kane had this hip surgery done on one side. Klingberg had it done on both.
Wait, he got a resurfacing done on both hips.
Yeah, that's the where they replaced the joint basically with like a metal joint in his hip. So that's the that's the injury and that's the surgery he's now rehabilitated from,
Oh,
right? Um,
oh.
so that to say, right, like his mobility was already declining because he had a problem with his hip. So there's a chance that this surgery has restored that mobility, or there's a chance that this is just an incredibly difficult for John Klingberg transition, or difficult transition for John Klingberg to
Let's
make.
hope it's post hip resurfacing Patrick Kane and not post hip resurfacing Jovanovski. Because like bro played a couple games after and went, uh-oh. It's not an easy thing to rehab from, but I mean, this is a surgery and procedure that, and recovery for that matter, that NHL organizations are becoming more and more familiar with. It's something that's happening more and more often. And maybe, just maybe, they've looked at this and gone, okay, he's pretty far along. We're confident where he's going or where he's already at. So, I mean, I'm, I wouldn't think that they would just be like, that Klingberg guy. He says he's ready to go and just sign him without looking into it any further. He would have to pass a physical, medical, all of these things. And I mean, by all accounts, he's ready to go. So let's see what he's got.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
very interested, right? Like it's a move for Edmonton that, I think there's a little bit I'm a little bit worried about the Oilers maybe going into going into a game where I think if Bouchard, Nurse, and Klingberg all dress, you have to keep them on different pairings to me. But thinking about the pairs that it opens up, like Edmonton's problem on the defense that Philip Broberg came in and solved in the playoffs last year was that the second that it wasn't Bouchard, Ekholm, or Nurse on the puck, like that defense was not hitting them forwards. Like the transition had to just come from the forwards. None of those defensemen were transitioning the puck up well enough. And I got to the point where Edmonton's transition game was so like formulaic because of that it was so easy for other teams to hem them in their own zone at different times. So I think you've getting another puck mover on that defense is big because I just it, having Vinny Desharnais try and break the puck out in the playoffs for the last 2 years just had it wasn't working for them, right? Like there were so many times where the puck would just die up that right side. And so if hopefully Klingberg is mobile enough that he can bring a little bit more fluidity to the Oilers defense, right? Like it's not necessarily that he needs to be a top four guy. Like I see him being their number five, number six on the third pair anyways.
Perfect. Well, moving on to one of those moments every hockey season where you go, damn, that's a hockey guy. Clayton Keller in a game against the Winnipeg Jets earlier this week. He took a puck to the face. It looked pretty ugly, blood everywhere. Very open wound. The kind of thing where you think, oof, might not see that guy for a while. I really hope he's okay. You start thinking concussion, eye injury, maybe one of those situations where it's a massive open gash and it's going to take some time to get going. No, 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 no. 12 stitches, little time with the doctor, and he's back. Keller, the captain of that Utah hockey club, comes back and he helps them to a 5-2 win. I believe he had 1 point in the game. I could be wrong. It might be two, but oh, it's just the one? Yeah, yeah. He had an assist. He had 2 points.
He
Two
scored
points.
into the empty net after he came back. He had an assist previous, and then
He got an empty netter after that.
yeah,
That's cool. That's really
yeah.
cool. Love that. Awesome. It made for a great photo as well. So definitely go check that out. And Aiden, when we get to the end of the season, I want to look back at a few of these moments. A few of these moments where you go, that's a hockey guy. And I want to dole out a most hockey guy of the year award from the Great Canadian Hockey Podcast. That's something I would like to do. We can maybe get a little graphic up, maybe make a little post. I think it would be really fun. So far, Keller has the biggest moment, I would say. Aiden, do you have any other contenders, any other that come to mind?
Not off the top of my head, but we'll definitely we'll either be looking back or at least keeping in mind these candidates moving forward. Um, Keller, obviously, yeah, that was the story of the game. Huge shout out to both Barrett Hayton and Logan Cooley though, because when Keller went down, I thought both of those guys like they had a monster second half of the game together, kind of in the absence of. So obviously, yeah, Keller's a warrior for coming back getting the empty net goal, but elevating their play in his absence was their two top centers. So kudos to them as well.
Love to see it. And speaking of award, defensive defenseman Mark-Edouard Vlasic, longtime member of the San Jose Sharks, gold medalist for Team Canada at the Olympics back in 2014. He's come out and said that he wants a defensive defenseman award. He wants that to be a thing. And this isn't a new concept. There have been people talking about this for a long time, especially ever since Erik Karlsson started winning Norrises with all of his crazy point racking up seasons. It started bringing up we should have an offensive defenseman and a defensive defenseman award, or a best offensive defenseman and then a best all around D award. Aiden, is this a drum you've been beating? Is this something you want to see? And if so, who in the NHL would you give it to right now?
Ooh, again, that's a hard one off the top of the head. Absolutely, though, I think it's a good idea. And Mark Edward Vlasic would have been a guy who would have contended for this award when he was playing. So I like the sentiment coming from him because you could arguably have named that era for him in that specific category of defenseman.
Totally.
I know I know some newer hockey fans know Mark Edward Vlasic as a very high cap hit liability in his later years in San Jose, but prime Mark Edward Vlasic was an excellent shutdown defenseman. I do like the idea of it being split offensive and defensive, James. Right? Like I think that's the best way to do it because, like, you know, I think I like the idea of it being that black and white. You know what I mean? Because it feels like so much of Norris debate is always about like, okay, but what do they do in this category, right? And if you have two awards with the very specified, this is for an accomplishment in this particular aspect, and this is for accomplishment in this particular aspect, then you take away from, I think, where much of, like you said, the controversy always was when Erik Karlsson would have a season where he was maybe average defensively and win the Norris Trophy. How about you? For defensive D,
I
what's
think
the guy
Jacob
that stands
Slavin
out?
takes it for like the past 5 years.
Yeah, Slavin for a while now has been.
Brodeen's one of those guys.
You could even make a Jared Spurgeon case, right? That he's
Yeah.
been around the block. Matthias Ekholm has been that guy for a long time too.
Yeah, some part of me really likes what Brock Faber's done defensively when healthy this season. And a lot of people thought, oh, because he's this elite talent, he's going to explode offensively. That doesn't necessarily need to be the biggest part of his game. And I mean, I know we're talking Minnesota right now, but what about Jake Middleton? Like, come on. Do they just have four guys who are elite in their own zone?
Jonas Siegenthaler too in New Jersey is
Oh
another guy that comes
yeah.
to mind.
Egenthaler.
Yeah.
Colton Parayko back in like 2019.
Yeah, Pareko's he's had a few seasons where he hasn't been quite the cream of the crop, but yeah, he's another guy that, you could have said maybe would have had this award under his belt had it been a thing while he was at that caliber.
I'm gonna tie in one more little topic here as we are talking awards. I've been beating another drum all season long, probably thanks to me being very high on him last year and taking him in fantasy this year. Dustin Wolf, the Wolf Man in Calgary. I actually had a franchise mode where I won 4 cups with Dustin Wolf as my goalie last year, and I would play Hungry Like a Wolf all the time, all the time, just nonstop. And he won like 5 Vezinas. So, I mean, it was pretty cool. But Aiden, it's really hard not to look at his stats and look at what he's done for that Calgary team to give them a truly reliable and elite performing goaltender. And like, don't think anyone listening, please don't think that this guy came out of nowhere. He was a hot prospect coming in, spent a couple years marinating in the AHL. And correct me if I'm wrong, but was he not AHL MVP once and then two-time AHL goalie of the year? AHL goalie of the year in 2020. Uh, WHL US Division Player of the Year in 2021. AHL All Rookie Team 2022, AHL First All Star Team 22 and 23, um, AHL Outstanding Goaltender, so Goalie of the Year in 2022 and 23, fewest goals against in 2023, and AHL MVP in 2023. So the dude took home 3 awards and a first All-Star team selection in the AHL last year. The guy is top notch. And as of right now, this season, he is rocking a 917 save percentage, 16 wins, 2 shutouts, 250 goals against average. It's looking pretty damn good. And all of this when he is only 23 years old. So you got to think, I mean, 24, 25 years old, a goalie really seems to hit their stride, especially if they're a guy who came in with a little bit of momentum. But Aiden, he's won his last 5 games, only one of them under a 920 save percentage. It's nonstop Dustin Wolf lately. And funny enough, his picture on the Calgary Flames website is him jumping in the air full goalie gear with skates on. It's pretty damn cool. You love to see it.
He's got him
Where
in a
would you
playoff
put him?
spot.
Where would you put him in Calder voting? I don't care for you to name the other guys.
It's hard to put him above three because of how good the field is realistically for that top three this year. But the 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 finalists that we could have for the Calder Trophy, man to man, all three are as strong this year as I think any year since 2020. That's the last year that comes to mind where you have three significantly standout rookies. Often it's one or two that are above the rest of the field, but you've got a group of guys here that are I think all gonna kick
I
off
have
pretty special
such a hard
careers.
time leaving one of the top four out of the top three. Because you got like a Celebrini, Michkov, Wolf, Hudson. And it's Celebrini clear number one, and then 2 to 4 are completely interchangeable.
Well, and there's a case to be made that Celebrini isn't even, the clear number one. I've got Hudson. I've got Hudson at four, and I've got Celebrini at one, and it's Wolf and Michkov as the 2, 3 that I'm actually struggling with the most. That's kind
Fun.
of my thinking, power ranking wise. Um,
Very fun. You want to talk about another rookie goalie, this one being in Montreal?
and rookie goalie, like we're talking about Dustin Wolf, who kind of had his eyes on the starting job for last season. This wasn't really expected to be the first full season to Dustin Wolf. At that, it was a surprise he played as many AHL games as he did last year. But you want to talk about a 23-year-old goalie coming out of nowhere, 2020 5th-round draft pick, Jakub Dobes from the Montreal Canadiens, the Ostrava Czech Republic native, has come in, James, and posted some crazy numbers in some crazy performances for the Montreal Canadiens through 5 games. And Montreal is, in the tier of teams, in the category of teams with the Calgary Flames and with the Columbus Blue Jackets, where they're having a lot of success in situations that you didn't expect. But Dobesh is 5-0-0, 4-0 win over the Panthers, 34 save shutout. That started the party. But then he beat Colorado, Washington, Dallas, and the Rangers. 957, 970 save percentages in those performances, taken that city by storm. That city of Montreal loves him. It was Sam Montembeault today. While they managed to get a win over the Tampa Bay Lightning, but 1.55 goals against average and a 940 save percentage for this young guy coming in from Montreal.
Love to see it, and you love to see his comments about his first game playing in front of Montreal's faithful at the Bell Center. He just loved it. He was stoked about it, and he said there was nothing like it. And he had a bit of a funny comment about how they keep playing him in road games, and I thought it was hilarious that he had to wait that long to have one of those performances in front of that crowd. I've never seen it myself. It's always been on my bucket list, but. Yeah, I'm glad he got to do it in front of them. One more goalie thing before we start talking all of the crazy trade news and all of the things that may or may not be going on. Alex Nedeljkovic, first goalie in NHL history to have a goal and an assist in the same game. This isn't even his first goalie goal, is it? Didn't he score one in the A?
I think he scored one in the A and he scored one in the E. I think he's had one at every level he's played at, or professionally, anyways, which is quite the.
So he knows to go for it. He knows the angle.
Well, and I think the biggest thing is you just can't hesitate when you've got the opening, right? It's the hesitation that causes that opening to close on you really quick. And clearly, clearly, the second Nedeljkovic gets that puck under his control, he's got his head up, and he's taking a look.
I mean, Is this is this something you think you might see more goalies go for?
Yeah, I think so because it's kind of just part of the it's part of the I think the younger generation of NHL players are just more more expressive, right? In the same way that you see the uptick in goalie goals is kind of, I think, for the same reason that you see an uptick in Michigan goals, right? Where it's just
Right.
NHL content is so out there that you see so many of the coolest things from all over the place that, when you're a young player, it's something that you want to do from a young age, and you're trying to do from a young age, and just kind of ends up actually being part of the game, much like, the Michigan's a pretty effective way to score if you can pull it off.
And the NHL's Instagram page will almost undoubtedly share every goalie goal that comes across their radar. I remember my ex-girlfriend's little cousin who played for the Penticton V's, had a crazy record for them in the season they had Bradley and Josh Nadeau. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but I remember him scoring a goalie goal for his like prep school team or something like that. And that one popped up. They shared it. And I remember just going, "Oh, I know who that is. That's crazy. What the hell? I didn't think I'd see that name ever again." But yeah, super cool. Love to see it. And I want to see more goalies go for it. For better or for worse. Take a risk. Give it a shot. Get your name on the board if you can.
If it's me, it's got to be a two-goal game. I am actually not super jazzed about seeing a goalie put the puck on the ice and try and take a shot when it's a one-goal game. Maybe it's just me. Even if there's space, it just makes me nervous. It's like, no, just no, no, no. Like, wait for the cushion. Like,
I get you. That's the
yeah.
nervous coming in. I understand that. But time to talk trade, and trade is the talk of the hockey world right now, other than the McDavid stuff we talked about. I would say this has been even more prominent. And you know what? We went a little bit into the drama last pod. JT Miller stuff. It feels like it's truly escalating.
Yeah,
Tell
well, and I
me what's happening.
when we talked about it last pod, wasn't our kind of sentiment we didn't want to talk about it until there was substance to it, but it finally seemed like there was substance to it, and now here we are, and like he was seemingly a matter of minutes from being traded on Saturday to the New York Rangers, JT Miller was. Um, and because it's Vancouver, the chatter about it has been something close to never ending. Um, it was a trade with the New York Rangers, James. Do you want to talk about the specifics? Because we do have a somewhat solidified report on what the trade was and the details of how the deal fell apart between Vancouver and the New York Rangers.
Yeah, definitely. So the rumor package we saw was Philip Hedel, Ryan Lindgren, and a first round pick. I saw there was a different defenseman in there at one point as well. I can't remember his name. He was someone who like almost cracked the team out of camp or something like that. Do you know remember what that name was?
Was it? It wasn't Zach Jones, was it?
No, 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 it wasn't Zach Jones. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Zach Jones was offered in the deal at some point. But Aiden, why did the deal fall apart? Why did that one not happen?
My understanding was the disagreement was over the protection applied to the first round draft pick. And I know that maybe seems like a menial detail to completely dematerialize this trade that was so close to happening. But what you have to remember is New York right now, they want to make the playoffs, but as much as they're 2 points away from the first wild card place, they're also only 5 points away from being the second worst team in the Eastern Conference, right? Like, and the Rangers have been kind of all over the place this year. So if the deal on the table was a New York Rangers first round draft pick,
For this
and
season.
yeah, and the disagreement was over whether or not it's lottery protected at all. It does kind of stand to reason that Vancouver would be the breaking point for this pick to be lottery protected or not. Because if you're looking at this trade, like I like Philip Hedel, I like Ryan Lindgren. This trade feels like this is the worst version of a JT Miller return for Vancouver, because we've heard Alexi Lafreniere's name, we've heard Braden Schneider's name, and I think if you're Vancouver, you have to expect to do better than this package. So if the Canucks are looking at that first round pick and saying, no, 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 like that is the part of the trade, that is the most valuable asset to us because we think this draft pick is going to be a top 10 pick this season, that might be something else. And now it might be where the Rangers have it as first overall protected, top three protected. I think the pick that the Canucks got for Bo Horvat was top 12 protected, right? So it could be literally anything. And it stands to reason that if the Canucks, are bending so much on the defenseman and the forward that they would have wanted versus the defenseman and the forward, no disrespect to Filipino and Ryan Lindgren, that they would have ended up with, it makes sense that maximizing that draft pick would have been high on the list as well. And not to mention, just from a Canucks fan perspective for a second, I'm quite glad that trade didn't happen. I do not think the Canucks come anywhere near winning that trade. Like you realistically, I know that it's been oft reported that the hangups around Braden Schneider, like if you have to, it is such a slam dunk for Vancouver. It fills such a need, and he's at the age that he will just grow with this defense core. Like it makes sense to me that like that needs to be it for Vancouver, and I'm glad that I'm glad that I'm glad the trade didn't happen void of him.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. And I mean, if it is the Rangers, which I believe that's a place Miller wants to go back to, it should be noted and emphasized that he has a full no move clause. Like he can nix anything. He doesn't have to say yes to any of these trades. I mean, maybe he will just say yes to one of these trades. Totally. Maybe an off the board team comes in with a great offer and he just thinks, all right, screw it. Let's get out of here. Let's call it a day here. He doesn't have to do that though. If his list is only, say, like Tampa, New York Rangers, Carolina Hurricanes, Dallas Stars, sure. From what I've seen, he hasn't given them a formal list. I mean, that could change by the minute. That could have already changed. That could be something that has long happened and has been misreported. We don't really know. But from what I gather, Carolina is in the mix. The New Jersey Devils are in the mix. And Aiden, I don't really want to speculate on Carolina right now because I don't feel like I know enough about what they would be offering, what would be included in the package. But if it's the New Jersey Devils, there might just be something that works perfectly. They happen to have a seemingly disgruntled former second overall pick from just a few years ago in Simon Nemec, who isn't very happy with his placement in the AHL and has voiced his concerns. Is this something you would like to see?
Yeah, there are times where trades in terms of fits kind of seem to be a match made in heaven. And for the New Jersey Devils this season, like we were just, we've touched on Jonas Siegenthaler and his role on that team. But if you look at the Devils roster, defense wise, Brendan Dillon's had a very, very solid season. Now he's 34 years old, but he's in the first year of a 3-year contract, paying him $4 million a season. That's so Brendan Dillon is going to be a part of that New Jersey Devils defense for at least the next 2 seasons after this one. Dougie Hamilton at 31 is having an excellent season. You've got 21-year-old Luke Hughes, whose spot is in absolutely no question. Brett Pesce just signed a long-term contract with the New Jersey Devils. Jonas Siegenthaler, like I said, is there. And they've got Jonathan Kovacevic, 6'5" right shot defenseman, who they've been leaning on significantly more than Nemec at every situation this season. So for Nemec, you have these pieces in place, and specifically in Dougie Hamilton and Luke Hughes and Brett Pesce and probably even Jonas Siegenthaler, where that top four is completely populated
It's locked in.
for a while here. Because Siegenthaler even I think is under contract till 2028, and that's the one that I think expires earliest outside of Luke Hughes, who is gonna ink in on a huge 8-year deal eventually here, naturally. So for New Jersey, it seems to me like even looking at New Jersey from a maximizing success standpoint, Nemec, in my opinion, doesn't fit into this team's window simply because they've got everything they like. They've got the defense in place that they want to have to compete with. That was the point of bringing in Brett Pesce, right? It's them building a defense they think they can win the Stanley Cup with. And I don't even think they've done a bad job at building a top six. I'm quite a big fan of the way that top six looks heading into the playoffs. It's my understanding that the New Jersey Devils want a defense, or sorry, want to add a centerman to this group. Vancouver very much needs a defenseman because it's rough at times, that back end for them. They need a right shot defenseman quite a bit. Like I am in no doubt that you put Simo Nemec on this Canucks team, he's a top four defenseman right away, right? And so all of a sudden you have the personal problems that Simo Nemec has with not playing in the NHL, which he's voiced now. See if you can pull up the quote, James, of what Nemec had said, because we haven't talked about that yet even. Um, so you solve Nemen's disillusionment with playing in the AHL. You solve the JT Miller issue in Vancouver. New Jersey gets themselves another centerman who, again, is a guy versatile enough that can easily play wing in the top six with either Nico Hischier or Jack Hughes. It doesn't necessarily need to be adding JT Miller down the middle in New Jersey, but if that's the spot they want to fill, that's a good fit, right? And James, like, look at the way JT Miller played in the playoffs for Vancouver last season, right? Like, did he not seem like the perfect kind of guy that you want to add to this young New Jersey Devils core, right? Like to drag them through a fight. Like it kind of seems to me that both sides here like would be at least in the short term, right, massively benefiting from this trade being made because obviously there are two players at different points in their careers, but it's a move that I still think you make if you're New Jersey. Um, Worth saying before we get to the quote, this week, Nemec in the AHL also had a 5 point game against the Hartford Wolfpack, 2 goals and 3 assists in a 7-3 win. So he's playing well. He's playing well despite maybe not wanting to be there.
All right, so exactly what Nemec said was, I believe I've proven multiple times that I belong in the NHL. I just have to wait for another chance and grab it when it comes. Nemec has said that he believes it's too premature to ask for a trade. This is something he actually talked about. He says, it's hard to say. It's still too early to request a trade. If this situation continues, it will have to be addressed. But for now, this is how it stands. So, Aiden, I mean, just talking about it though feels like that's almost requesting a trade because he says if this continues, it will have to be addressed. He's basically threatening a trade request. That's what I'm reading.
And that's kind of why when I'm talking about this New Jersey Devils defense, I'm focusing so much on A, who's there, and then B, when the team brought them in, right? Like, because I think a huge piece of this is Nemec, like, he's got to be very aware of that. He's got to be very aware that this team has a plan for what they want their defense to look like moving forward. And as of right now, he does not seem to factor into those plans, right? And it's a team that are seemingly at the start of a competitive window. And I completely understand the frustration. And again, you look at the situation in Vancouver and it's the polar opposite, right? Like you are rushing him onto that second pair immediately if you're the Canucks. And the guy is going to play as much as he, as well as he performs. There will not be any sort of restriction on his ability to excel in this Vancouver lineup, right? So it seems like it's a good spot for Miller, who's reportedly more keen on going to the Eastern United States, and seems like a good fit for Nemec, who joins an organization who are going to be very keen to put his services to use in the NHL.
Now, Aiden, I don't really think it would be Nemec on his own. There's got to be some money moving around, in my opinion. And they seem to love Paul Cotter there. I don't really think that's a piece that's going to move. But what would you think about JT Miller and a draft pick or small asset of sorts for Simo Nemec and Dawson Mercer?
I'd be all over that for sure.
Do you think the Devils would be all over that?
That's a little bit tougher. I think in if Vancouver retains enough on Miller to make it like right now, New Jersey, I think, has just shy of $2 million in cap space. Mercer's AAV is 4. Simon Nemec is still on his entry level contract. So I think that the trade works for both sides if Vancouver is going to agree to make up the difference, because with Mercer being moved out, New Jersey would still be just over $2 million shy of making that work. So in
Right.
my head, it makes sense a little bit, because I think if you're New Jersey, like in my opinion, giving up Mercer and Nemec is too much for JT Miller. But if you are having the Vancouver Canucks retain multiple millions of dollars of this contract for the next 5 years, that's a big commitment that
That's a big commitment.
it's a big commitment that they're taking. And I think that fact on its own is where I think the deal makes a little bit more sense from New Jersey, because you're not needing to involve a third team. You are not needing to give up a first or a second round draft pick, which they're definitely going to want to have in their pocket. They already don't have their 2025 first. They traded it to Calgary um, as part of the Jakob Markstrom trade. So it's it seems a little bit the stars have to align, but I see the path for it, right? And I see the value in both teams. And, I see the value in, for instance, like I said, New Jersey not needing to bring a third team into a mix to acquire a player of Miller's caliber, which name another situation where, you're going to bring in a guy with this much experience and the talent that Miller has for the money that you could get him at in these specific types of deals we're talking about.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, there's some fine tuning that would have to go on, and you know what? I would even love it just as much if it's a completely off the board trade for Miller, like I was mentioning earlier, a team we haven't talked about, a team that hasn't really been reported on, just making that push and going and nabbing that star. But enough JT Miller talk. We'll move on from there. No doubt you're going to hear about it again next pod, so we'll keep this as brief as we can. But there's a lot of other. Potential movement going on. I think that's the best way to talk about it. Um, I really, really, really didn't want to talk about this one. I really don't because I have this fear that it's not going to work. And the it in question is Mikko Rantanen and his contract extension in Colorado. As per reporter Jim Berenger, Colorado and Mikko Rantanen are having a little bit of trouble with their negotiations. The quote, I believe, was that it's going harder than expected. Um, that $14 million number has been thrown around the hockey sphere. I think he's worth that with the cap continually rising. And I mean, that is probably about what he would get on the open market. I hesitate to think he would get any less. This is a 100-point scorer. This is a 50-goal scorer. This is a guy who is a complete game breaker. Not even just on a line with Nathan MacKinnon. When he's on a different line, he is still driving play himself. He is that guy. He is a modern day power forward. He is a sniper. He is one angry SOB that people don't really want to contend with. And he is most importantly a Stanley Cup champ. So, Aiden, is this something you think is going to work out? Because I can't say those words because I am superstitious and I'm scared to jinx it.
It's hard to picture him in another jersey for sure.
Yep.
Um,
Other than the Chicago Blackhawks? Yeah.
yeah, I know where you're coming from.
Yep.
It's difficult to it's difficult if you're Colorado to agree to give somebody more money than Nathan MacKinnon, right? And I think that's probably where the big hang up is in the fact that, hey, the best player on our team, the guy that's about to win the Hart Trophy again,
Yep.
is making $12.6 million. So we don't want to go at or above $12.6 million for your contract, right? Is probably where the hang up is. And I'd very much understand it if that was the position of the Colorado Avalanche, and I definitely get where you're coming from, that this is a player worth that and or more.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to do anything to keep him. Anything you have to do to make it work, you have to do. It's just how it's going to have to work. And I really don't want to say the words have and to together again, but you have to do it. I don't want to see this Avs team without Mikko Rantanen on it. Sorry. I know they still have two superstars, but I mean, it's not a reality I want to see come to fruition. Let's just put it that way. Let's move on again. Defenseman Ivan Provorov wants to extend in Columbus as per Pierre LeBrun. Again, Pierre LeBrun stays busy. I've really, really liked what I've seen from Provorov in Columbus this year. He's been depended on a lot. He's playing a ton of minutes, I believe over 22, damn near every night. And if he does stay in Columbus, Aiden, this is a big hit to available defensemen in free agency this summer. This is a guy I feel like a lot of teams were targeting. I think if you're Chicago, I mean, we were just talking about Chicago with Rantanen. This is a guy who would totally want a Blackhawks sweater. I mean, at some point you have to start adding. And I think a lot of the guys that they grabbed were a little bit more of a short-term thing. I mean, they got a veteran Alec Martinez, they got TJ Brody, they got blah 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 blah. They got Patrick Maroon, Tavo Teravainen, Tyler Bertuzzi, and Taylor Hall, all in free agency last year. So it's hard to say they haven't been adding, but they haven't gone and added that guy that they're giving a 5, 6 year deal to. That guy who is a instant addition to your core. He is a person depended on every shift. I mean, some of those guys are depended on like that, but I'm talking when this team is contending, when this team is trying to make a difference every night and pursue a playoff berth. I think there's going to be a lot of teams that would be looking for him, but with what defensemen end up making, especially when they extend, I want you to think Gavrikov. I want you to think Severson, just as a couple names related to the Columbus Blue Jackets. It's hard to picture a world where Provorov isn't getting 6 million. Do you think this is something the Blue Jackets should commit to?
I'm gonna go no. And it's more about, like, again, I'm not a fan of Ivan Provorov by any means. But I'm looking at this in the same way that I'm looking at Nikita Zadorov from last year, right? I think
Right.
it's a very, very, very similar situation to me, where you have a player who had kind of settled into a role in his old team and then in his previous situations he was in, and you have him go to a new destination and take on new role, new responsibilities, and have a little bit of a revitalization. Um, Much in the same way that I wasn't a huge fan of Vancouver throwing buckets of money to retain Nikita Zadorov last year. I don't know how sustainable it is if you are committing 6, 7, 8 years and that much money to a player. Um, it was funny you mentioned Vladislav Gavrikov, because I think Ivan Provorov's, if he ends up coming off the free agent market, Vladislav Gavrikov is going to have a much better summer, because I think that puts him as the next best available left shot defenseman on the market, quite frankly, after Provorov. Um, if you're Columbus, I kind of see the success this season as a little bit of found money, right? I don't think that the Sean Monahan led core, right? With, like, I don't think this is the core that they're gonna win the Stanley Cup with. And so I think you save the money for the players that are part of that core, who might be Kent Johnson or Adam Fantilli, right? Or Denton Mateychuk. You have a lot of guys that are likely to require a huge chunk of that cap space. And to me, a 28-year-old Provorov, I can think of better uses at this point for that organization.
Moving on, Aiden, talking about another defenseman, and we've talked about Chicago a lot. As per Darren Dreger with TSN, teams have been calling the Chicago Blackhawks about Seth Jones, and It seems like there are some people who think taking on that $9.5 million cap hit until the 29-30 season is a good play. Seth Jones has been scrutinized pretty heavily by a lot of people who just see his plus minus, just see that he's playing on a bad team. His play has come under criticism before, but I remember a Seth Jones that was elite in Columbus. And I remember that Seth Jones being why Chicago was so gung ho about investing heavily into him. I mean, it's worth noting that he has, I believe, the third most ice time among defensemen in the last 3 or 4 seasons. And that's only behind Drew Doughty and Cale Makar. So when you look at that plus minus, when you look at those advanced stats on the defensive end, you need to keep in mind how many minutes this guy is playing on that bad of a team. This has been a god awful Chicago team pretty much his whole tenure there. So I don't really think whatever team will be getting him is getting a liability, is getting a problem, is getting a bag of trouble. What do you think he really fetches from a team? What kind of assets are coming back Chicago's way? Because I don't know if they want to just keep piling up draft picks.
I still think Chicago, those calls to Chicago, James, I don't see them happening void of a conversation about money potentially being swapped, right? Like, unfortunately, and I say it unfortunately because you're right that at 30 years old, like Seth Jones suffers from Darnell Nurse syndrome a little bit, where like his effectiveness and his ability as an NHL defenseman is always going to be undercut by the fact that he is overpaid, right? And it's going to be hard for people and for teams to see past that number. Um, but it's going to be hard for the team acquiring him to see past that number, right? Because he's going to be making this much money until he's 35 years old. Um,
Isn't that bad?
no, and again, the salary cap going up is going to help things, but when you're asking about a return for Seth Jones, like I think it's hard to objectively analyze it in the context of that caliber of player is going to fetch this particular asset because there is no way that this trade gets made without maybe it's retention coming in from another source, maybe it's another contract going back the other way. Like remember the trade between the Canucks and the Coyotes, where you had the big Oliver Ekman Larson contract going to Vancouver, but then you had shorter term contracts with big AAVs like Louis Eriksson going back to the Arizona Coyotes in that deal, right? So it's hard for me to objectively analyze like what Chicago could be getting back in return because I I think the money is going to be such a big factor of whatever move they make it's we just can't ignore it, right? Like it is going to be too big of a piece here. Like do you understand what I'm saying? Like even if they're going to be able to fetch a first round pick, it's going to be something else is going to be tied in there to make the money work. It might be an extra asset for retaining salary. It might be some dead cap coming back the other way, either a contract on LTIR or potentially a player that is on an old contract that are being overpaid on another team, right? Like no matter what it is, there's going to be another factor in here, and it's going to hugely impact it.
And that's why you think a swap with the Calgary Flames for what player makes
Yeah,
sense.
I think Jonathan Huberdeau and Connor Bedard are kind of like a match made in heaven, quite frankly, right? And I think if I think Calgary would be best served to get the assets they can get for Rasmus Anderson and Mackenzie Weegar right now, right? I think the success they're finding is awesome for that team. It's awesome for guys like Coronado and Zeri to be playing in meaningful games right now. But I think the Calgary Flames and the moves they've made in the last 2 seasons have been trending towards a team who knows that their best chance at winning the Stanley Cup is down the line. And Rasmus Anderson and Mackenzie Weegar are at the age right now that you're probably going to see regression start to creep in. So, in my opinion, if you're able to, if you're Calgary, get rid of $10.5 million of Jonathan Huberdeau, which to me, they do not need Huberdeau on that team. I think they have enough talented forwards, both young and guys like Kadri, Sharangovich, that are there and established, that no matter what version of Calgary you want, like if you want a Calgary Flames team to compete and win, I think they've got enough forwards that they don't need Huberdeau at that cap space. If Calgary are going to be bad, well, might as well move him out. And I think having a veteran Seth Jones on the team with a young Zane Parekh is a really good idea for Calgary, right? Like Jones was Parekh, right? He was a CHL scoring stud in his draft year who came into an organization like the Nashville Predators that already had established defensemen in front of him, right? And so I really really like the idea of Jones in Calgary to kind of teach Parekh the ropes. It gives Calgary the flexibility if they want to retain Miramanov on that right side to then move on from one of or both of Weegar and Anderson. And then for the Chicago Blackhawks, I think Jonathan Huberdeau gets a lot of assists on Connor Bedard's wing, like for the foreseeable future.
Very fun, very fun. Well, time to move on from there. The Nashville Predators are reportedly not shopping center Ryan O'Reilly, but they're listening to offers. I don't know what the hell that means. Does that mean you want to move him or you don't want to move him?
I think that means don't expect the phone to ring with a, hey, we'll give you Ryan O'Reilly for, but they're not going to hang up the phone if you call and you say, hey, we want Ryan O'Reilly. That's my understanding.
Okay, the Predators, who are filled with talented players, filled with pieces to move forward with, and filled with draft picks for that matter. They have a lot of draft capital. What do they want for Ryan O'Reilly? Is this a situation where, okay, what I think is best would be a talented younger center who needs a bigger role but won't find it on the team he's on, swapped for a reliable, proven cup winning two-way forward who will help you get over the hump. I think that's an ideal situation for the Predators and whoever else may be involved. We were talking earlier about how a JT Miller trade to New Jersey might look. Is Ryan O'Reilly and a draft pick for Dawson Mercer not something that makes perfect sense?
Yeah, I was thinking O'Reilly as almost, and I say consolation prize, not in that O'Reilly is a worse player than Miller. It's just different points of their career, right? I think O'Reilly's
Totally.
34 now. But consolation prize in the sense of like if the deal with Vancouver isn't there, if there's not a trade realistically to be made, pivoting and trying to get Ryan O'Reilly, I think is wise because in my opinion, the cost of acquisition is going to be significantly lower. Like I don't think it's going to be a Simon Nemec going, but like we said about the New Jersey Devils when we were talking about them in the JT Miller context, it's a team that has drafted and accrued prospect and draft capital, right? Like they've got a lot of nice young pieces in that organization. Um, O'Reilly's it's hard, James, because again, we sat here. It doesn't feel like too long ago, and we talked about how Nashville looked like they were gearing up to make the playoff push, and they're 8 points out right now. It obviously looks like this season is it's going to be a long shot for them to work their way anywhere near that spot. But does this change the plans long term for Nashville? Because if the Predators want to be a playoff team next year, I wouldn't move them. Like I think I
I agree.
yeah, I think if you want to be there with this group, you keep that guy, and he's the focal point, right? He's the center of that forward core, and you've got Stamkos and Forsberg under contract for a long time. The way this team is built, it seems to me like they have a focus on success, and I think trading O'Reilly would work against that personally.
Wholeheartedly agree, man. And on top of that, I mean, They're 8 points out, but they just came back from down 5-1 against the San Jose Sharks tonight and won 7-5. So this is a team that's not going to quit, and they have all of the pieces necessary to not quit. I mean, last year after the FU2 tour, as it's been called, where the Predators managed to make the playoffs after being right out of the mix and having a fun night together seemingly stripped away from them. They just took it and ran with it. I do think they really miss Ryan McDonough, but I also really think that this is a roster that can do some damage. This is a first round matchup in playoffs that I don't want if I am any of those top seeded teams, especially the unproven top seeded teams. So, I mean, I think you made the right play. I think you have the right idea. That's what I would hope they do, but I like to see some chaos. So, uh, a couple more things. Shifting over to the Pittsburgh Penguins, let's take a look at the Eastern Conference. As per Marco D'Amico, the Pittsburgh Penguins could be shopping basically anyone without a full no move clause. I've heard a lot of things. I've seen the meme with Kyle Dubas having two phones in his hand and looking stressed. I have seen quite a few things that say, hey, it's time to turn the page. Tristan Jarry has been waived. No one claimed him. There has been chatter about Erik Karlsson being uh, on the move to the point where they are calling teams. They're asking about who would take him and potentially willing to retain money. And on top of him, there's Chris Letang, there's Marcus Pettersson, there's Rickard Raquel, there's Michael Bunting. I mean, other pieces like don't they still have Noel Chari? Don't they still have Matt Nieto? Don't No, they don't have Nieto anymore.
Yeah, he's still on the. Yeah, he was playing in the AHL for a little piece of this season. I know he was playing games, but I think
That's a
he's
fourth
on.
liner I'd be happy
He,
to take.
yeah, he's on the roster right now.
I'm a Matt Nieto fan. I'm a little biased, but I mean, other than that, you got Anthony Beauvillier, you have Brian Rust. I mean, like Drew O'Connor would be very appealing to teams. Blake Lizotte, I wouldn't mind. Like Matt Grzelcyk is definitely gonna get moved in my eyes. P.O. Joseph again, maybe. Who knows? Um, I'm not really seeing much of anything that definitely wouldn't get moved, other than, of course, Sidney Crosby of getting Malkin. Aiden, who is the first domino to fall in Pittsburgh, and why is his name Marcus Pettersson?
Yeah, that seems like it's that one just because that's the one that we've been hearing about the most. Rickard Raquel's put up a sneaky 23 goals already this season. Brian Rust is almost at 20 goals already this season. So I don't think you're going to see Pittsburgh struggle to find teams that are going to look at those players and say, yeah, we want those guys on our team in the playoffs.
I like
Um,
Raquel in Minnesota. I think
yeah,
Raquel Wild would be great.
that's a good fit in that top six. Um, Pedersen to me, yeah, is the one that we've been hearing the most about for the longest amount of time. Um, James, it's frustrating to kind of hear this now because like it was so unnecessary for Pittsburgh to do what they did in building this team to the point it is because uh, imagine this 2 years ago. And imagine the return for all of these players and the imagine the options open to this Pittsburgh Penguins team had this happened 2 years ago. And to me, there was no other way that these 2 years were gonna go aside from not winning anything. Like there was no chance, right? And it seems like now like I understand the argument that you didn't want to waste the end of Crosby's career, but he's still a point per game player and he's stuck there now. So you're wasting something, right? Like he still didn't win in those years. What? You wasted two first round exits by but right? Like congratulations. But uh, yeah, I'm struggling with the lack of consistency and direction with the moves that this team is making because I am somebody who at this point is saying like what gives, right? And why were all of the other moves except for literally like Jake Gensel is the only other seller's move they made, and I think it was because they knew they were going to lose him for nothing, right? Like I don't see them making many other decisions that were with this inevitable outcome in mind, and it's 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 making me wonder a little bit about the personnel. That's that's where I'm at a little bit because this is now the second team, right? That Kyle Dubas has had in a position of great promise or great talent and not executed properly.
Fair, but in a sense, like you and many other people have been beating that drum for a long time. You look at any comment section about anything related to potential Pittsburgh moves that isn't on a Pittsburgh Penguins fan page, and you're going to see a lot of this kind of talk. And we have had a lot of this kind of talk on the pod. I did really like the summer they had. I liked their little bit of draft pick accumulation. I liked the prospect swap. I liked a lot of what they did. But I understand the frustration with the non-committal approach, and maybe that's all about to change. Only time will tell. One more thing on our trade front. A few days ago, Bo Horvat came out and he said the Islanders have to start winning if we want everyone to stay. And there's a reason that I left this for the end of our trade talk roundup that we're doing. And that's because while this is a business, while this is a lot of transactions, while a lot of us fans and armchair GMs are playing fantasy hockey right now, talking about who could be moved, what could be moved, and where's a good fit, the human approach really needs to be a big part of it. At the end of the day, these are guys with families, these are guys with friends, these are people with kids in schools who have friends. And I bet a lot of them really don't want to go anywhere. I bet a lot of them really have roots planted. I bet Bo Horvat or someone else on the team has does Bo Horvat have kids? I don't know if he does. No. Okay, well I bet there are people on that Islanders team with kids who are very likely to get traded this year who are sitting there thinking about it and their kids are friends with other guys on the team's children. And they're sitting there thinking about how I'm going to have to uproot this child when I get this call anytime in the next month and a half telling me that I'm going to Minnesota, Carolina, Dallas, wherever else where I might know one guy, I might know two guys. Sure, I'm going to make friends. Sure, things are going to work out eventually. But what about when I go to free agency and I'm going to have to move again? I'm going to have to do all of these things where my family is going to be struggling. They're going to be stressed. Moving is not easy. Aiden, I just moved from bedroom to bedroom in the same apartment. It sucks. Even that sucks. That is nothing. That's a full-blown nothing burger. And sure, yeah, they get a little bit of help. They have people in these professional sports organizations whose job it is to make these transitions easier, to help you find a place to stay, to hook you up with a real estate agent that has sold homes to other players, to maybe help you rent a home from a former player or whatever that might be. But regardless, Aiden, this is a stressful time and it sucks for a lot of people. While it is exciting for all of us watching, that is something that I think we and all of our listeners and all those in the hockey world have to remember. Well, after that little rant, I think it's time for our news around the NHL to come to an end for the week. Aiden, what's going on in junior? And more importantly, what's going on with one of the game's top prospects?
Yeah, it was an uncharacteristic lull for Demidov in the KHL where he had he wasn't getting the ice time for a little stretch there, and then the uptick. Like if you look at his ice time in the KHL for his club team, SKA St. Petersburg, through December, it was like 6 minutes in a win, 8 minutes in a win, healthy scratch, 6 minutes in a loss, 8 minutes in a loss, 10:56 and 9:47. And then right around Christmas, he moved up the lineup. And this guy has been absolutely electric ever since. There's only been 2 games since December 17th that he hasn't recorded a point. He just scored an unbelievable goal. I don't know if you saw it on Instagram where he walked
Yeah.
around the I believe Lokomotiv Yaroslavl defender where he goes between his legs and then does a really good job, a little subtle thing that I remember TJ Oshie was really always really good at where he made his lower body nice and wide to help him protect the puck in motion. Um 16 goals, 37 points in 45 games in the KHL this season. James, we're watching Matvey Michkov, and I hope everybody's enjoying Matvey Michkov because there's another, and he's on his way. If Michkov is little Kucherov, Demidov looks like little Kaprizov out there. He's just so dynamic, and man, the Montreal Canadiens got an grand slam home run at fifth overall last year. Everything I've seen out of this guy this season has further reaffirmed that Chicago made a mistake. Honestly.
Tough, tough, very tough. I mean, Levshunov could end up great, but yeah, I get what you're saying. 100%. I think it's time we take it out of hockey and we haven't done games or trivia the last couple pods. That's something I think we will be focusing more again and getting back to next week. But for now, Aiden, were there any movies you watched since our last time recording?
Well, there definitely was. I'll let you take it first though, because there was a couple. I don't know which one I'm going to talk about.
Well, I last night I watched Self-Reliance on Netflix that's starring Jake Johnson. He played Nick Miller in New Girl.
Yeah.
It was a comedy about a fairly lonely guy falling into a dark web life or death manhunt game.
Hmm.
And the only way you are not in danger of being murdered by people who are dressed up in funny ways, like video game characters, cowboys, whatever it might be, and hunting you, is if you are not alone. But the thing with the game is they target and offer this. So basically, if you survive 30 days while being hunted, you get $1 million at the end. $1 million cash is what they're promised. And since it's targeting lonely people, it ends up being quite difficult for these people with no connections in life to not be alone. Because if you're alone, they're coming after you, they're watching you, they're going after you at all times. It's kind of exhilarating. It's very funny. It's a little bit mentally jarring at times. I found it a really funny watch. Jake Johnson was super funny. Andrew Kendrick was really funny. There were a couple other really interesting parts. If you're just looking for like a good popcorn flick to watch on a weekday after work sometime, give it a go. Highly recommend.
What's it
As
called?
I said,
Self-Reliance.
self-reliance. Yeah. And as I've said, there aren't enough comedy movies out there anymore. So this one made in 2023 that I didn't notice at all popped up on Netflix. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed as much as I did.
Nice. You went positive. I'm gonna go negative.
Oh,
Did you watch the first Joker? You had to watch first Joker.
actually, I
No?
haven't at all because
Okay.
I was going to watch it and then I watched Napoleon and then Joaquin Phoenix made me just I don't know, I just wasn't really feeling it. And I don't know, never got around to it.
Okay, it's quite the movie. It's quite
Yeah.
good. Um, the sequel was quite horrible.
I've been told that.
Yeah, it was bad, bad.
I've been
I
told it's so bad that most people think they should have just never even considered letting that script get out of the room.
yeah, that's valid. Um, again, like it's it was a Oscar-winning billion-dollar grossing movie, so I understand why maybe there was, there was some pressure from above to to make a sequel. And I'd very much like to commend Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga and Brendan Gleeson for trying, right? Because they all three of them tried. Like they didn't mail it in. They played the characters that this quite brutal script had them portraying. Um, but it seemed like every decision in this movie, starting with the fact they made it a musical, which was the the main critique of it from the start. I went into it wanting to try and take the musical at the spirit it was intended, which, in my opinion, was just it was supposed to highlight the continuously deteriorating mental state of the main character, like where he's now all of a sudden seeing songs break out in real life, which obviously aren't there, but even trying to give it that benefit of the doubt, it just didn't work. Like it just it none of it worked, and I am very often, you know, disappointed with decisions made in the pursuit of profit rather than art, and this entire movie was that, and it and I resent its existence for it, I guess, is the best way to end that.
I mean, Aiden, when you saw it was a musical, did you go in thinking it was going to be anything other than what you just realized it was?
I'm not a musical fan, so it's hard to go into a musical specifically optimistic about liking it, right? And so I'm going into that thinking maybe I'm not gonna like it because it's a musical, but I can recognize an objectively good musical for somebody who likes that kind of movie, right? And so again, like you're right that maybe the warning signs were there if that's your point, but I was also trying to a little bit be like, okay, so it's just not for me then, but then it was evidently for nobody, realistically, it seemed.
Okay, to bookend that, for my money, the only three musicals I want to watch are Mamma Mia, La La Land, and The Lorax. That's it. That's the whole list. I'm not interested in any other ones. I mean, I've tried other ones, not doing it for me, not working, but I'm just not a musical guy, so I get you. But Aiden, we've reached the nitty gritty. We are at the end. And unless you have anything else to add, some might think this is abrupt, but I don't think we have anything else to say.
No,
Without further ado,
we've done it. We've done it.
let's roll that outro. Thanks, guys.